tidal inlets of the sea where rivers meet the ocean are among the most biologically productive natural habitats on Earth. Although they make up less than 3% of British Columbia's 27,000 kilometers of coastline, according to Fisheries and Oceans Canada, about 80% of our wildlife depend on estuaries for survival. On the east coast of Vancouver Island, the estuaries are suffering at the beaks of Canada Geese. It's estimated up to 15,000 Canadian geese overwinter on southeastern Vancouver Island, most of which now reside on the island year-round and spend up to 12 hours a day grazing on grass shoots and other plant materials to take in the nutrients they need.
They become very good at hanging out in urban and semi-urban environments, and they've done very well in making a living in our estuaries, in particular the Englishman River Estuary and the Little Qualicum River Estuary. We've gone from having no summer resident geese nesting to having over 70 nests on the Englishman River and up to over 40 on the Little Qualicum River. And what happens is they spend a lot of time feeding in rich carex, lungby sedge, channel edge communities that are very important for other wildlife and very important for fish.
The inflow of both seawater and fresh water provide high levels of nutrients in both the water column and sediment. Plants such as carex sedge trap the sediments, slow down currents, produce food, and form a dense mat of vegetation that is laced with tidal channels. Biologists fear if the population isn't managed, it'll mean the demise of these vital ecosystems.
When the geese come in, they actually follow in along the channel edges, browsing on the carex vegetation of the estuary, and grubbing the rhizomes in the wintertime. And this causes tremendous erosion of the soil and eventually washes a lot of the plant matter out, to the point where the plant can't recover. So you have huge areas of essentially open ground, open soil on the estuary.
Nobody in a million years would guess that Canada geese are responsible for this.
Banding studies have shown that resident geese have a strong tendency to return to where they were born and use the same nesting sites year after year.
Well, they do so well because of our mild climate, because a lot of estuaries, tremendous food production in estuaries, a lot of agricultural areas, school grounds, golf courses. So there's a lot of excellent habitat for these geese. And what people don't realize is when the geese were introduced, they actually held the adults back in pens and released young birds, or else brought young birds over from the mainland and released them. And geese learn how to migrate from the adults. They follow the adults down to southern areas. And so these geese didn't learn how to migrate, and so they became resident birds essentially. Most of them hang around the entire year.
We rounded up groups of birds of both estuaries, and we have over 150 birds with white collars on their necks, with with codes starting with M for the Englishman birds and K in the Little Qualicum estuary, and that's a lot easier to read, and we've got some excellent data on where these geese are hanging out.
Females lay an average 5 eggs per nest. Over her 15 to 20 year lifetime, she may produce more than 50 young. Biologists say the pressure on estuaries has been significant.
I think that's the important thing to keep in mind, that it's not just affecting the vegetation, it's affecting all of the native organisms that are dependent on the estuary, from the salmonids up to the wintering and migrant waterfowl.
Guardians of Mid-Island Estuaries is working with partners to try and restore the Little Qualicum and Englishman River estuaries, and at the same time develop a comprehensive, science-based and supported Canada Geese management plan that could be implemented here and conceivably elsewhere in the province.
Well, the first thing is we want to document the impacts and show that these geese are having a tremendous impact. For example, in the Little Qualicum, we estimate that the detrital input loss amounts to between 17 and 18 metric tons dry weight of this sedge, carex, every year. That's a lot of food for the invertebrates and all of the organisms that are supported by those invertebrates. That's being lost to these systems.
Well, I think that's exactly the right approach. You have to have this based in science. You have to demonstrate the issue in black and white terms, and also determine a course of action that you know is going to give you the results you're looking for.
The Guardians have erected fenced-off areas in key regions in both estuaries to protect the sedge and give it a chance to regrow. They are also test areas for research technicians who spend hours over several months meticulously recording data for the study.
On the Englishman, we have 6 exclosures that we've set up, and generally they're either 15 meters squared or 100 meters squared. We'll compare what the vegetative response is within the exclosures versus outside, so that we can measure the impacts that the geese are having in this, especially the carex sedge communities. On the Englishman River, there's very little left. It's the whole estuary has been impacted to a certain degree, and there's very few areas that have healthy communities, so that's a problem.
Estuaries contribute greatly to the biodiversity of the aquatic environment. They form essential transition zones for marine species traveling from the sea to rivers and from rivers to the ocean. They serve as fish nurseries for salmon and sea-going trout.
The anadromous salmonids are totally dependent on both freshwater environments and the estuary for their early life history and survival.
BC's Living Rivers Trust Fund, which is committed to protecting and improving the province's rivers, watersheds and fish habitats, is supporting and participating in the study.
I mean, we were basically invited a year ago to look at the 2 estuaries, Little Qualicum and Englishman, and the impacts geese were having on the sedge community, the native sedge communities that are very important for juvenile salmon productivity. There's a lot of benefits by having healthy sedge communities that are providing shelter for the fish as well as contributing to the food web. And we went and had a look, and one of the outcomes of our kind of synoptic surveys of both estuaries was that we see a dramatic reduction in the amount of cover for young fish in these tidal channels and the lower river channel that's are essentially widening and filling in with sediment and losing their carex sedge communities on the banks. And most of the riparian vegetation that may have been part of the estuary ecosystem at one time has also been lost.
The BC Conservation Foundation has proposed a restoration project in both estuaries that would see the creation of habitats made up of large woody debris, natural elements that have slowly disappeared due to upstream logging and land clearing for urban development.
We've been working in both watersheds in the freshwater environments for kilometers upstream over the last decade or longer. And one of the techniques that we've used to restore fish habitat for the juveniles that spend up to 2 or 3 years rearing there before they go to the ocean is to place large lateral log jams, actually build log jams in these rivers in order to provide escape cover and overwintering areas, sheltering areas for these young fish.
I saw a good amount of fish at this large woody debris site, mostly coho, some chub, and a few shadduck.
They also believe the addition of similar large woody debris structures will make the estuaries less attractive to Canada geese. The Foundation's biologists have found evidence the geese are being hunted by predators such as otters that can hide behind these woody debris structures.
What we see in the estuary is essentially the same lack of those large woody debris elements that are so important that we've documented through repeated swims and electrofishing over the last decade. So important on the freshwater side. We feel that there's an obvious opportunity for us to come into estuaries that are lacking in that wood structure that used to be here decades ago and recreate some of that, as well as connect some of these side channels that may have been alienated through dike and road construction.
The effect on human habitation is also being felt. Every year, geese flock to farmers' fields, school grounds, golf courses, parks, and beaches. Thousands of dollars are being spent chasing geese away and cleaning up after them.
It's important that we recognize that this is a very serious problem environmentally. even more so than the inconveniences associated with having these geese all over your community. So our first and primary concern is the estuary and estuaries like it in the immediate area, and the impacts that are occurring on the vegetation and on the overall health of these important, ecosystems.
The geese nest from usually April, May, June sometimes for the late nests. And we began by addling eggs.
The Guardian's objective is to work with local, provincial, and federal governments, wildlife management, and the public to develop a cohesive geese management plan that will be supported and implemented.
And I think I can speak for a number of local governments, because I've had many a discussion with them who experience the same issues, is to be able to be given the ability to manage the problem more effectively. What we've done to date is what we've been permitted to do under legislation, and that's essentially been to addle the eggs and then try and reduce populations in that respect, but it hasn't been working. It's clear that there may have been some positive impacts, but nowhere near enough to start controlling this issue.
So this area would have been intact right to that point right here.
It's a learning process. But in order to protect the estuaries and then let them recover so that they can support the myriad of native organisms that are dependent on them, the goose population has to definitely be reduced.